Wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another edition of the Places We'll Go show. Once again, got a stellar guest for you, Claire Beale, and I will just go on to introduce Claire. But firstly, welcome, Claire. Great to have you on the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me very early, but I'm trying to pep myself up with lots of caffeine this morning.
Yes, well, that's right. You may not have realised, but we're still going out 8 o'clock on a Friday, even though we sort of publish it whenever during the day. But yeah, our guests are sort of, somewhat sideswiped by the 8 o'clock Friday morning thing. But anyway, welcome, Claire. So just to introduce everybody to Claire, our stellar guest today. Claire is most famously known for working at Campaign for 20 years. So the preeminent UK marketing publication, marketing and advertising publication. I would say Claire is right up there in the top. I remember Brian Clough used to say, I'm not the best, but I'm in the top one. But Claire is one of the most hugely respected journalists in the marketing and advertising world. And I think that comes from both strong empathy and very strong insight and curiosity. And it reminds me a little bit of Kim Scott's Radical Candor book, high challenge, high care. You dig in because you care, as opposed to choosing not to dig in because you care, if you see what I mean. I've also got a bit of a personal story with Claire, in that Claire really was integral to getting the marketing industry sprintathon off the ground with Campaign 2019, including featuring in the ad for the event, which was very brave of you, Claire. So I thank you again for that. But then things never go perfectly, and we'll talk about the fact that as a result of restructuring at Campaign after 20 years, and maybe Claire would have stayed there for a lot longer, that job was made redundant. And so Claire came to a fork in the road and is now co-founder of the Creative Salon, which many people will be aware of. And the Creative Salon is essentially a members services, but also provides training and advisory services to marketers and agencies. And we'll go on to hear a lot more about what Creative Salon is trying to do. One thing to note about it is that Claire and Salonniere have pledged 10%, or at least 10% of profits every year to organisations that are helping the next generation of diverse talent, which is why there's a huge spiritual alignment with the School of Marketing. Final thing to say is I asked Sonny for a little bit about what she thinks about Claire. So this is this sort of unexpected bit, maybe, Claire. This is what Sonny said. I don't think I had ever dreamt that one day I would be Claire Beale's business partner. The brackets here is they were kind of rivals back in the day. A journalist I've always hugely admired. Before we became business partners, I often used to think, reading her or watching her, if Claire had been a painting, she would have busted the frame. Now that I really know her, the one thing that truly sets her apart is her generosity of spirit, so rare and so very special. The acts of nurturing, championing, listening all come very easily to Claire, and I continue to learn. There you go. So brilliant to have you on the show, Claire. Very welcome. And I'll hand to Richie to get us started.
Oh, thank you, Mark. And thank you so much, Claire, for being on this morning. Honestly, it's a real privilege for both of us. And it's great to finally meet you. I've read so much of your work in the past, so it's really good to put a face to all that literary prowess, as it were. But look, let me get started with the first question here. Am I right in saying that you would be a first-time founder with the Creative Salon?
Yeah, absolutely. I must say I never have spent a moment up until being made redundant thinking one day I really want to launch my own business. So it was never an ambition. I think Mark alluded to it in his introduction. I loved my job and I probably would have stayed there until I retired, and then I would have died, and that would have been my life, and I would have been very happy with it. So no, it was never a burning ambition. But like so many things in life, when you kind of find yourself at that moment where you have to play your hand, I did it, and I'm so happy to have now have that founder tag after my name, because it's been an amazing journey so far.
And I just want to tell us a little bit more, right? Because clearly doing it in this moment in time, the last couple of years, all the turbulence that go along with it. How's the journey been? Enjoyable, or give us the lowdown?
Yeah, I mean, Creative Salon was born out of, not necessity. I got made redundant and I have a mortgage to pay, and, I've got 2 kids. And so I needed some income. I couldn't just slink off into the shadows. So it was born out of necessity. But from the minute I was told I was going into consultation at Campaign, I never felt anything other than excitement, because suddenly my history, the rest of my life was an unwritten story. So that was instantly thrilling. And I've approached this whole journey, and I know Sanu has too, with really open mind, open heart, and looking for the joy in this experience. So it has been really exciting, and I think we've both felt that we've proved things to ourselves and stretched ourselves in ways that we would never have dreamed of. And I guess most importantly, to say right up front, is we have done very well so far because we've had so much support from the industry. So yeah, it's a really lovely opportunity for us to give something back, and that just means every day we kind of go into it with a spirit of love, which I felt uncomfortable saying in the early days, because we were really clear that this business had love at its heart, love for the industry, love for the people, love for the kind of next generation of talent that we could see, knocking on the door. And I used to stumble in meetings when we were kind of trying to explain to people what we were doing, because the word love isn't really used in a business context very often. But, it definitely sits at the core of what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a word that's really come up very much. Redundancy has come up a lot on the show. And I love the expression, don't be sad it's over, be glad that it happened.
Yeah.
And then the other thought, of course, is that everything we do is practice for the next thing. And so the positive payback of all the connections and gifts that you've given through your working campaign probably did help. I'm actually interested to know a little bit more about Spirit of Love. So what does that mean? What do you give back to the industry? What's the give and get? How does it all work?
Well, I think both of us feel that we have benefited and had a very privileged career to date, because we've been, I mean, Sanu came to this country 20 years ago. She was born in India and started her career out there. So she turned up in the UK and didn't know anybody, and started a job at Marketing Week, actually, and instantly felt that she was taken into the bosom of the industry and found lots of people very supportive. And she found mentors and champions, and she very much feels a debt of gratitude to the industry and the people in it. And I kind of feel the same. I arrived in London with knowing nobody, definitely not coming from that kind of background where you had godparents who worked in advertising. Or I knew nothing, knew nobody, had nothing. And we feel that we've had a very privileged careers, not financially, but emotionally and inspirationally, because of the brilliant people we've met in the industry. And so it's been good to us. So that's where the love comes from. And to be honest, I think we've both worked for companies in our time who make money out of the industry, and it's just a revenue stream amongst many others for the companies. And we were really clear that we wanted our business to start from the position of what can we do to support, champion, celebrate, help kind of pave the way for a successful future for the industry, not how much money can we make out of it. And it kind of helped that neither of us came from jobs that were hugely highly paid, so we didn't go into it with any kind of financial expectations at all. It was very much about we've had a really privileged time. What can we do to give back some of that support?
Claire, I really love that ethos, and it is a rarity in our space. And so I think you're really touching on something that resonates with certainly ourselves, but I'm sure a wider audience as well. I really want to dig a little deeper into, you talk about the role of love, and I just can almost get a sense that both you and Sonu have a lot of love for each other, and in what you both love and respect, I suspect, is probably a good way of phrasing it. But what have you felt has been the role of being a co-founder?
Yeah.
And would you want to go on this journey by yourself had Sonia not been in the picture?
Yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't have wanted to go on the journey by myself, because I'd never seen myself as a founder, a business person, an entrepreneur in any sense. I know, I mean, I had some responsibility for a significant amount of revenue when I was at Campaign, but I was never setting budgets. I knew very little about the kind of mechanics of running a business, and neither did Sanu. But to share the learnings together has been really helpful, because in every meeting where we've been bombarded by lots of information about spreadsheets and projections and whatever I haven't understood she has, or whatever she hasn't understood I have. So at a very practical level, it's been really good to have a partner. And I should say here, it's the business was founded by me and Sanu, but very early on we brought in our colleague Jeremy Lee, who also used to work for Campaign. So kind of the three of us together have really established the business, and Jeremy's been a really fundamental part of it as well. But with Sanu and I think we because we didn't know each other that well, I have to say, before we went into business. We'd kind of worked together a little bit, and we'd certainly circled each other for a long time. But instinctively, we knew we shared a lot of the same values. We liked the same people. We love the sitting in meetings talking about creative ideas and strategy. And we love the social side of the industry as well, going out and meeting people. So to share all of that with somebody, to have a kind of somebody by my side that I can text any time of the day and night going, oh, this was amazing, wasn't it? And sharing the highs and lows. And it's all the cliched stuff. But I'd never really appreciated before how joyful that could be.
Yeah, we shouldn't forget Jeremy. I actually bumped into Jeremy last weekend, and he is an important part of the triumvirate, so good call out. Let's go back in time. It's 20 years at Campaign. I suppose the two obvious questions, how did you land that job, and what kept you there for so long?
Yeah, well, I was actually so Campaign's published by a company called Haymarket, and I joined Haymarket, I was there for 27 years. So I joined in the early 90s. And I'm going back a long, long time, obviously, but when I was at university, I did a degree in English, and everybody on my course was applying. This was in the late 80s. Everyone was applying for jobs in advertising or journalism. And I found a job advertising The Guardian in the days when jobs were advertised in newspapers. I found a job with a company called Mediatel, which is still going and thriving, to be a journalist writing about advertising and media and marketing. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, but this kind of seemed to combine the things that everybody around me wanted to do. So that was my first job in the industry. And it actually was, I was writing online news back at the tail end of the 80s. And it was, those of you old enough to remember the days of Prestel and Oracle, where it was a kind of very basic digital content delivered on through a telephone line. So it was a pioneer. But yeah, that was my first job, digital news writing.
And then 20 years or 27 years, what kept you there?
Well, so once I joined Campaign, Haymarket was a great company to work for. Obviously, it was a family-run business, and it has successfully had people kind of staying around for a long time. So it was obviously corporately they were doing something right, because there were a lot of people that stayed for a long time. I never have sat there thinking, this is where I want to get to in 3 years' time, 5 years' time. So I never was an ambitious person. I was only ambitious for, in the moment, I want to get the best story. I want to meet the elusive person. I want to have my byline on the front page. That was the kind of the extent of my ambition. It was very day by day. But when I got there, I find the industry so fascinating. And obviously, if you look at the span of my career, over 25 years, while I was there, 27 years, how much the industry has changed. So when I started out, we were writing on computers, but there was still a lot of cut and pasting that went into making a weekly print magazine. Fast forward, and Campaign was a weekly print magazine. So you worked hard 3 days a week, and then there was nothing to do for 2 days a week because the news cycle didn't start until the following week. So it was a very, very different time, very, very different job. And the industry itself was much simpler. There were 2 commercial channels, and Sky was just getting off the ground. So if you imagine how the arc of the industry has developed over that time, there's always been something new and challenging to learn. And I just have found myself surrounded by people that I have always found fascinating, inspiring, challenging, thought-provoking, filling me with, I have to say, and the immense privilege of that job over all of that time. I don't think I ever woke up in the morning thinking, I don't want to go to work today. I think I've got a difficult day ahead of me. I never, ever felt that in a quarter of a century, which, I realize is a massive privilege.
I tell you, Claire, that certainly is a bit of a rarity. And I am super intrigued about this, the thinking around not planning, a longer term game plan, as it were, for your career. And even use the term wasn't ambitious in, I guess, a conventional sense of that term, but more ambitious in the sense of really creating the best stories, getting the best sort of editorial elements to it. I wonder if perhaps you were reflecting on that thought, would you do anything differently? And if you were then advising perhaps your younger self, would it have been exactly the same that you'd have, as the way you'd have carved out your career in that way?
I think I think it is very good to have a career plan and have some idea of where you want to end up. And I still have a big mortgage, I still have a mortgage that I struggle to pay every month. And I would have liked to have had a bit more kind of ambition around my financial acumen and working out how, as I got older, my salary kind of kept pace with my age and experience, which it kind of never really did. So in that sense, yes, I suppose, just the experience that I've had over the last 18 months, there's a tiny voice at the back of my head that says, if you only found yourself in this position 10 years earlier, how much more energy would you have for it? How much more kind of could you have thrown yourself into it? I do have kids. I do have lots of other kind of things going on in my life. But I don't know. What would I have lost in terms of the joys of working in that job at Campaign for so long? I saw Campaign through into its international expansion, and I ended up running a network of 8 editorial teams around the world. And so I would have lost that experience perhaps. But if I was talking to a young person now or talking to my kids, I think you need to have a plan of how you're going to not move up the career ladder. I think that's a very old-fashioned way of looking at it. And that certainly, had I thought about it, that would have been the way I would have viewed my career, as this kind of vertical ascent. And I don't think that doesn't feel appropriate anymore. I think finding what you're good at and finding being happy to have a more horizontal career, I think is a really healthy thing. I guess it's just making sure that as your responsibilities and your life changes, that your salary keeps pace with that, and that your experience is rewarded and respected by the people around you.
you started to talk about purpose a bit there. I want to talk about that, but come back to it because I want to talk a little bit about your love of the craft of advertising and writing about advertising. We had Stephen Woodford on a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about some of the best advertising he can remember. In particular, 1984 obviously is a classic. So I mean, what's some of the best stories that you've written about some of the best advertising that you've seen and heard?
Gosh, that is a tough question, not least because I'm very loath to look back too much right now, to be honest. There was a moment when I was at a campaign where we did the 50th anniversary of that magazine, and it felt like a moment in the industry. So this was 2018. And it felt like a moment in the industry where we were poised on the kind of the tail end of what had been probably a golden period in British advertising. And we were heading into a much more digitally centric, internationalized future. And we did a really heartfelt celebration of the people and the work. And I think we did justice to 5 decades of a vibrant, world-beating industry. But from that moment on, I was really clear I'm not looking back anymore. So I tried very, very hard not to be one of these people that for a moment thinks, oh, the work used to be better, or the agencies used to have more respect from clients, or there was more colourful entrepreneurs in the industry, or anything like that. I'm really clear that I'm facing forwards. So it is a difficult question to ask. I mean, I remember sitting in meetings and seeing things like Guinness Surfer and being showcased some of the reels from the agencies at the end of the 80s and into the 90s, and just feeling dazzled by the breadth of exciting work. One thing that I really remember actually was I can't remember the event, but it was a tribute that was paid to John Hegarty, and they played all of his Levi's ads on a big screen. And I always think seeing advertising in a kind of collective moment where you're sharing the experience with a lot of other people, and it's big and it's shown in all its glory. That is always for me one of those moments where I catch my breath and the hairs on the back of your neck go up. So I remember moments like that where just the sheer brilliance of the industry is shown loud and proud. But yeah, Mark, I'm really looking forwards. I think there's so many more exciting things to come.
By the way, I love that phrase, facing forwards. And I think that is, I think we all need to sort of look to the future, certainly given the last couple of years. Perhaps a lot of people want to put those couple of years behind in many ways. But tell us a little bit about what you see as the key opportunities then as you face forwards.
For me or for the industry or both?
Let's do both.
Okay, for both. I think there's we've already mentioned the word entrepreneurialism a couple of times this morning, but I do think there's a bubbling, renewed energy around people striking out, and that there are, as the business has become on the one hand very internationalized, and the holding company has become dominant, and has rearranged in many ways the big brands into more collegiate groupings. That's created space at the smaller end of the market, I think, for new types of agencies to come through. And I find that really, really exciting. For Creative Salon, obviously what we're trying to do is create a different type of platform that is very relentlessly focused on celebrating the industry, making the case for commercial creativity, being champions and supporters of the industry, as opposed to ambulance chasing headlines and clickbait stories, and we want to go deeper and be more meaningful in the role that we play in the industry. And that feels like fresh territory right now. So that's exciting for us. We want to take our business to New York. So that's our next port of call. So we want to expand beyond the London market. So I'm really excited about that. That's probably an end of this year, early next year move. But yeah, I'm learning so many new things, and that is always exciting, isn't it?
100%.
It is, and the good intent must be quite invigorating. And let's just pick up on that positive intent. And maybe this links a little bit to purpose, I don't know, but the fact you're giving 10% of your profits every year to help towards the next generation of talent or something of that ilk. Tell us a bit more about the why and what of that.
Okay, so we were, as I said right at the beginning, we were really clear that we were the only reason to create our business. Nobody needs any more content in their lives. Nobody is sitting there with 5 minutes that they don't know how to fill. So we were really clear that whatever we did had to inspire people, support people, and secure a pipeline of brilliant, diverse new talent for the industry to secure its future. And all wrapped up in this kind of, we're doing it because we care about the companies, the people, and the future. So that was our starting point. And from there, we spent a lot of time thinking, maybe we could buy it. We kind of did, we got quite far down the road of thinking, let's buy a house. Let's take a big gamble, get a loan, buy a house where we can put up, we found one in Stoke Newington that had 8 bedrooms. We could put up 8 people who would never normally be able to live in London and do it rent-free for a whole year. And they'd create their own little community of young people, and then they'd move on and another 8 would come in, and it would have been very kind of, 8 people is not very many, but it would have been this kind of resource for the industry. And then the more we looked into it and the more we spoke to other people that are in this space, we realized there are lots of people doing great things already. And why would we take away any momentum from anybody else that's already out there doing it with knowledge and experience, rather than us coming in and not quite knowing how to make it work properly. So in the end, we decided the best thing that we could do would be to use our skills and experience and our network to financially support those organizations that are already out there. So this idea of a minimum of 10%, we kind of plucked out of the air, because what we want to do is make sure that we give as much as we can. But I think we didn't want to make a public commitment about 60% in our early days when we needed money to kind of get our momentum behind our business. So it's a minimum of 10%, but hopefully that will increasingly translate into meaningful amounts of money. And we chose our first partner as the Brixton Finishing School, because we'd met Ali a few times and really admired what they were doing there. 10% of our profits in the first year isn't going to go very far, but it might pay for tea and biscuits down at the school in some meetings. But we're going to take an intern from there. We're going to use our business as an opportunity for some of the young people going through that school as well to come into the industry, get a taste for it, meet the people that we meet, sit in the meetings that we sit in, where we're privileged to, all of this inspiring, informative information. So that's where it started from, but it is totally predicated on supporting the industry and giving back, and we love it. So what can we do to make sure it's still here and thriving in 10 or 15, 20 years time, 50 years time? And we're really clear that it will only thrive if it makes sure it's getting the best talent in from the widest possible types of people who can really craft a more future-facing, modern industry that reflects the people it's talking to.
Gosh, absolutely. And I think, we concur, certainly the School of Marketing, it's very similar sort of thought process. And, if you look at the stats around, I think the two sort of, beyond the high level barriers that exist for diverse talent to get in, actually we have an as big a problem in retaining them, because it feels like you can potentially get someone through. But once you do that, actually keeping them happy in an industry which is dominated with all the biases that we all know exist is a real challenge. And it really feels like systemic change needs to happen in order for us to realize any real momentum in this area. I would urge you to think about apprenticeships as part of that internship sort of movement. Clearly a big plug here, but I think really important, because in fact, I was talking to Marketing Week just the other week. And it's funny, if you look at the context of further education and higher education, the term apprenticeships in its current guise has only been around 4 or 5 years, in the light of day when further education and higher education has been around for hundreds. Yeah. So we're really at the nascent stages of this new sort of vocational type movement, where people can have an opportunity to learn and earn at the same time, not come out with debt. And it really benefits a sort of socioeconomic young person in a different way than the traditional individual you might see going to university. So there really is something to be had there, which I think is powerful. So
we should talk more.
Fighting that fight. Honestly, it's and by the way, apprenticeship, there's huge barriers to it as well. But anyway, we digress. Passion point. Here we go. You touched a nerve, Claire. You touched a nerve. But anyway, I really want to sort of get your sense for the role of mentorship, particularly when you talked about, how the intern was able to kind of come to your meetings and learn from you. What's the role of mentoring that's played in your life to get to the success that you've achieved?
Well, I never have had a formal mentor. Maybe it's partly a factor of my age, in that when I was early on in my career, these things weren't so much part of the kind of corporate landscape. But there were certainly a couple of people who I would say were always, so one would be John Bartle, who was a founder of Bartle Bogle Hegarty, and the other one would be Jeremy Bullmore, who's a legend in the industry. Both of them are several years older than I am, and both of them have been incredibly kind and supportive all the way through my career. So there was no sense in which they were officially given me as somebody to mentor, but they both took it upon themselves to play that role in a soft way. By the same token, I have never officially been a mentor of anybody, but obviously I've run teams, and the thing about an editorial team is it's a very close-knit team, and we've always tended to kind of hire people straight out of college and university, and then groom them into the ways of campaign. So that's as kind of, to be honest, that's as close as I've got to that word mentor. And I'm really supportive of the idea of formalizing the process, because I think it can drift into, let's just have a nice lunch or kind of the odd catch up where there's not really any clear agenda. So I really support the idea of it being having proper purpose behind it. But I have to say, in my career, it's never really been something that has been something that I would say was a formal track that I've been able to go down.
Yep.
I love the idea of reverse mentoring, by the way. I think, if anything, that's what I need right now, is reverse mentoring, because I find a lot of my energy and inspiration now is coming from the younger people around me who are coming in with, I have been around in this industry for a long time. I love seeing it through the eyes of new people coming in. And both of my kids don't speak to me anymore. So the more kind of young people I can spend time with who are opening my eyes to different ways of looking at things, I really welcome that. So yeah, reverse mentoring.
Well, Claire, we should definitely talk because we can help. There we go.
I'd like that.
I think done well. It's a highly mutual process, mentoring. I want to just rewind to a couple of years ago, and we've talked with many of our guests about redundancy, and many people have said that those setbacks have been the precondition to their success. Myself being made redundant a few times. I mean, it's painful as it is. How do you dust yourself down after that kind of? Was it surprise? How did you process it? How do you dust yourself down?
I've actually been made redundant twice in my life. Once when I was, I think maybe about 24. So I got made redundant from my first job when I think it was the dot-com bubble burst, or maybe there was a recession anyway, and in the early 90s, and I got made redundant. And I remember being really in floods of tears, thinking I'm never going to work again. And as so often happens when I talk to other people around me who've been through similar situations, the best possible thing came out of that experience, in that that's when I moved to Haymarket. I was only out of work for a few weeks. I ended up moving in with my boyfriend at the time, who I've now been with for 30 years, and blah, 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 blah. When I got made redundant from Campaign, the initial conversation that you have, and this was in the middle of the first lockdown, so it was all done remotely. And it was obviously a time of chaos and people not really knowing what the future would hold. So this was May, June 2020. And I got called into a Zoom meeting. And I kind of knew, because they'd said, we're going to put people into consultation. So if you're going into consultation, you'll find a diary invite in your diary. So I kind of knew that conversation was coming. They ended up taking out the whole kind of division that I was part of. So it didn't feel personal particularly, but I had been there for a long time. And I was probably a more expensive person. And in the spirit of new blood, frankly, maybe it was time that I moved on. So I never had that moment of it's unfair. It's they've made a bad decision. I totally embraced it. I think I was a little bit, my voice was a bit wobbly in the meeting maybe, but the minute that meeting ended, I was fired up. I didn't have a problem with the decision. I understood the decision, and I thought, here's my life being given a different opportunity. And I must admit, it really helped that within, I don't know how this news gets out, although I should do, because I spent my entire life as a journalist trying to find out news before anyone else. But within maybe 2 hours of coming out of that consultation meeting, I had a call from a very, very senior person in the industry saying, I've just heard this. I don't know if it's true, but if it is true, I'm going to get in a cab and I'll come over to you now. It was in lockdown, so I will not reveal who it was who was wanting to come over. But whatever happens, I'm here for you. I'm going to support you, look after you. And then within a few hours of that, this person's big global boss called me and said, yeah, there's always a place here for you. So instantly I felt, whatever happens, I'm going to be okay. So I was really lucky in that sense. And it just, I remember waking up the next day thinking, wow, it's exciting. This is, who knows what's going to happen for the next 10 years of my career now. And I've never had that for a long time.
And what a lovely way of looking at it, the half glass full sort of analogy here, because, it could have swung in your mind either which way, being very nostalgic, but as you say, face forwards, right? Facing forwards and moving on. And what a wonderful individual to have in your life. But it just goes to show how much support you've garnered over the year, Claire, and, how much goodwill that you've created just springboarded you into what you're doing now. So I can only applaud you for that. We're certainly at the end of our segment here, but I'm just going to finish on one last question, particularly as you suggested that, you got the next era, the next innings that you're currently on. But you did say that you'd be more than happy to have, lived out your career with Campaign. But I just want to get a sense from you as to what your vision is for yourself for the future. What would you say you'd want to have your legacy in this next era as you move forward?
I would love to think that when I leave the industry, that I leave it having done everything I could do to make sure it's got a good future ahead of it. And that everybody that has come into contact with me feels that I've added something to them and being a support to them. But I really want to spread some joy as well. I think I want my business and me and my colleagues to be a point of positivity and fun and happy champions of the business. And I think if I end my career being known as a happy champion that spreads some joy and does some good and paves the way for the people coming up behind us to take that on, then I'll be really happy.
Well, that's what a lovely, uplifting way to end. Claire, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. I'm going to do my best just to share what I think I've taken away from this experience, and then hand to Richie to close. But we started talking about the spirit of love, and there's just a generosity and a humility that comes through in everything you say. You use the word privilege a lot, both in a more multidimensional way than people normally talk to it. The privilege of the experiences you've had when people normally talk about sort of wealth or education. And so, there's a huge amount of generosity that comes through. The second thing I say is that very values-based. So the way that you talked about your relationship with Sanu, the good intent of the Creative Salon, and just generally, a very values-based individual, which is lovely to hear. I'm also very struck by the way you talked about ambition in a slightly different way, the ambition for the output rather than a yearning for something on the never in the future. Be present, focus on the now, be great in the now, and a lot will follow. Of course, facing forwards, what a great way to talk about things. And that positivity, to say that I understood the decision of being made redundant and I was fired up and within 2 hours, wheels were in motion. Not a lot of people are sort of that bounce backable, so that that fire in your belly really comes through. So it's been lovely to have you on, and I wish you every success, both with the Creative Salon, but also as a happy champion.
Oh.
What a nice way to think about what your legacy might be, and I'm sure you will go on to achieve it. So thank you again for coming on the show, Claire, and I'll pass to Richie for final words.
Wow, thank you, Mark. And I think you've summed up and taken a lot of breath out of the words I was going to say. But so it just leaves me really to say that I think we're kindred spirits in the impact and ambition that we have for the industry, but doing so to really leave that positive impact. And I think I hope that today is the start of our conversations to come as opposed to the end. So I'm really glad that I've finally been able to put a face to all the writings that I've read over the years. And it's just such a pleasure to get to meet you finally, Claire.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Absolute joy.